the very day they were faced with such devastating magic that they couldn't stand against. They had nothing left to do, and were forced to put him into a sleep, a very long sleep. He left his companions behind and froze his life for a long time. 300 years passed, and our hero suddenly woke up. However, nothing had disappeared or ended, and the restored world and all this calm and cheerful life turned out to be just an illusion. And even now this whole world is trying to envelope the darkness that comes out of the depths. When he turned 13, one hero went to a magical tower, and the hero was looking for just that. She had heard an old story that once every 100 years an incredibly gifted mage appears, so she decided to see if it was him or if it was all a lie. She had stunningly beautiful snow-white hair and golden eyes. That she came after his soul was far from surprising, because at the age of 13, the guy was already an archmage, so the fame of Archmage Lin had spread far beyond the Magic Academy. What an annoying person. She still wouldn't stop. So I still had to put her in her place by saying that he wasn't a genius or a child, and that his name was Lin. Apparently that was unnecessary, because she glowed with happiness when she found out that it was him, Lin, the youngest 4-star archmage in the history of the Empire, and that she had come to the right place, while noting that he was a child after all, beginning to literally mock the archmage. After all, it's hard to call him a genius magician if he still has to change diapers. However, if this youngster joined her, the great and powerful adult, to join her company, she would change his diapers every day. Already about to get rid of the pesky fly, he uses a fireball, but the girl quickly backs up and says she was only joking, it's just a joke. Slowly stepping back, due to the potentially impending fireball, she hits her head on a and the books, which were lying on the very top of the cabinet in a not quite stable state, instantly pelt the clumsy visitor. By doing so, she got rid of herself, spoiling the condition of the books in the process. But the young archmage this picture made only a second stupor, and then laughed. The girl is happy that she finally made that sullen guy smile, and that's when she got him interested. Oh, what a time those were. Finally, the girl introduces herself. Her name is Esther Alter Chirrupin, and she is a fake warrior of the Celestial Church. A fake warrior was someone who enhanced their body with various modifications, but the fee for such enhancement was incredibly high. Because of this, their lives were very short. Esther came not just to joke around. She asked Lin, as an archmage, to help defeat the abyss that was coming from the South Pole. She wanted the guy to join her group of heroes. Her group was already known. After all, besides her, there were 2 others whose fame had spread everywhere. Even the young archmage knew about them. The famous disciple of the Kae's Empire and the fire dragon priestess of the Dragon Republic, Frida. But Lin is not particularly eager to set out to meet the adventure with Abyss and die. However, the girl pulls him back, saying, "Who wants to die?" Lin wonders about the other 2, and whether they are as interesting as she is. To which Esther confirms that they're just as crazy as she is. But there's still a big fat plus for her joining her team, and that's peace, of course. That's a strange word. For some reason it resonated with our hero, a man who grew up in a slum but then was rescued and studied magic in a tower. After all, he even had a goal of becoming the highest-ranked mage in the Empire. A 7-star mage. After all, it was rumored that if you became a 7-star mage, you could see the truth of the world. And Lin wanted to reach a dimension no one had ever set foot in before. Staying in a tower all his life and reading books about magic sounds good. But to become that legendary 7-star mage, he needed to leave the tower, learn what lay beyond its walls. And while that was true, traveling aimlessly didn't inspire getting out of the tower at all, so Lin plunged into contemplation. Was this really what he needed? And that's where the hero came in. Sassy Esther, so clumsy, and with her offer to save the world. It was so unexpected. But even that weak offer was enough to shake him from a lifetime in the tower. Therefore, he immediately agreed to go to the outside world. Even though he didn't even think about something high like saving the world, he still accepted her offer and set out on his journey. During his journey, he learned that Kays was an archer whose accuracy would drop incredibly without a drink, and he was a mute. Frida, on the other hand, was an avid smoker, and of course she justified it by saying that as a priestess of fire dragons, she had to cast at least a breath spell. all the while letting out a crazy laugh and exhaling black smoke in the guy's face. There was no shortage of monsters, and they were always available. And despite the images of Kais and Frida, when it came to the matter, they had no equal in battle, and they were real masters of their craft. This company was incredibly powerful. Those terrifying monsters they encountered on their way, and all those minions of the abyss could not resist them. Esther, on the other hand, often made jokes about Lin during their adventures, so he wouldn't even dare to fall in love with her. Once, she even asked him if he wanted to go on a trip with her after it was over. After all, she is very afraid that little Lin is so innocent that he would be fooled by any other girl. The trip was both exhausting and full of fun, all as befits a true adventure. And so it has been 5 years since Lin began travelling with this strange company. And when the journey to destroy the abyss came to an end, Lin's body showed signs of erosion, which was to be expected, for it was all the aftermath of 5 years of enemy attacks. And before the final battle with the abyss, he dies, consumed by a poison that poisons his soul. His life is about to end. Esther, Frida and Kais can do nothing. Frida is completely powerless. She cannot heal or break this curse. Esther starts crying from powerlessness, and Lin himself doesn't want to die. Esther doesn't want to give up. However, Lin stops them, telling them not to worry, showing that he has done something. A tiny lapel of the Overlord's filter, an immortality spell carved right into his heart. It was the magic that would put him into a dream state and heal him. But then, he didn't know how long it would take before he could be revived and see his friends again. But that was an option for the very last resort. And that emergency has come. Esther and the others are still in shock, but Lin promises them that he will return and that they will definitely prevail. In the end, Esther backs up and promises E that she will prevail, but he must also promise her that he will come back and that they can see each other again. The friends can't hold back the tears as he leaves them, and Esther promises that she will be there for him when he wakes up. After all these promises, the hero falls asleep. His battle with death has begun. There was a feeling of buoyancy and emptiness, as if he was sinking into a swamp. And that mission to the world, had he never been able to see the truth from the very magic system of the 7th star? Esther, Frida and Kais, it was as if he was leaving them alone to fight, while he was slowly sinking deeper and deeper into the darkness. And it looks like this adventure together ends here, in front of the Abyss army that carried on screaming. All that appeared before Lin was nothing but darkness. Darkness was everywhere, and there wasn't a single gap. But as he began to flounder in the darkness, a ray of light suddenly appeared, and he slowly opened his eyes. Suddenly, someone grabbed him by the shoulder, calling him Rain and asking if he was all right. "Mom?" the boy asked immediately. He was surprised, so he had a mom, and he wasn't an orphan. It was only now that he began to regain consciousness and realized, where was he? This kid's mom couldn't understand why her kid was acting like this. In the square of heroes in front of the Vatican, in his thoughts, he only wondered, is there a monument in honor of Esther's group? And before his eyes was a huge, grand monument, already a little worn by time. The year of birth and the year of death of each of the heroes were also inscribed on it. That's where the guy focused his gaze. Seeing this, a strange, dark and sad atmosphere appeared around our hero. After a moment, he decided to ask what year it was. His mother didn't know what he was talking about, and also his behavior started to scare his mother more and more. But the boy asked again, "What year is it?" Finally, his mother gave up and said with a sigh that it was 1418 according to Teresia's calendar. In the back of his mind, he tried to deny it, but the words of the woman who was the boy's mother shocked him. After all, it was the year 1418. How did such a thing happen? Thoughts swarmed in his head. Countless questions arose. Had he been reborn? Or was his memory simply superimposed on someone else's body? The sensation of being in this body was strange. He couldn't understand what had even happened to him. Pleasant memories came flooding back to him. Esther's laughter, Kaya's drunken ramblings, the smoke of cigarettes from Frida. That was 300 years ago, isn't it? So did they win the last battle or not? Although that was just a pointless question, because if they'd lost, they'd hardly have a monument to them. And it was because of their incredible victory that he was now under this calm and peaceful sky. His mom is tired of him saying stupid things, and she asks him a question. Why is he saying such obvious things? There is also a rumor that if you go up to the Vatican Tower now, you can see the frozen remains of Lord Lin. He's finally gotten it. It's like he's taken over someone else's body. He had learned from his mother that his beloved Esther had stayed by his side until her death, which is beautiful but also sad. And his mother wondered, what did he think of that? But he just laughed in response. Poor mother. There's something wrong with her son today. Why is he laughing? It's actually a very sad story. However, he laughed because he was surprised that Esther kept her promise. Mom was becoming increasingly uncomprehending of her son Rain's behavior. He walked over to the now ancient monument and touched Esther's name with his hand carved on the monument. After all, someone had failed to keep his promise. Lin couldn't keep his promise. Realizing this made him cry like a child. How could he not do it? The tears couldn't stop. Back home, he decided to learn about the world that was already new to him and took up the books that were in his family. In all this time, he didn't know what the other three had said about him, but he was not forgotten. He had become a historical figure. Even the emperor himself had personally erected a monument in his honor, and many mage towers and even mage families began to honor him as a saint. It was intriguing, of course, but after these 300 years, what does he have left? All he has is magic and memories of past adventures, like the one time they had to run away from a giant worm. It was like watching Dune, or how they visited a place that had a lot of birds. Esther even decided to make a portrait of him then, which amused Frida a lot. What remained with him were the faces of his companions who smiled at him in his memories. But all this he could read from books, for it turned out that these were not only his memories, and all these stories became legends. He remembered Esther saying once, one fine night, that moments only become memories when they are shared with someone. So his memories aren't just memories. Until he dies and meets his friends, they are memories that will remain unshared. These memories he has to live with alone, like an unrequited echo. He's been acting pretty strange all day and settling down to read books. So Mom decided to bring him a cup of tea. Of course his friends are gone, and it's time to accept that reality. But it's as if they left him this world as a legacy. And as he looked into the cup of tea he had brought, he couldn't help but wonder, what should he do now? And in that instant, it was as if he saw a ray of light. A small memory of Esther made him remember that he still had work to do. After all, the Holy Man Empire had divided the mage class into 7 levels. A 1-star ordinary mage was Bandoran. 2-star average mage, Limits. A 3-star high mage is Atlanteus. 4-star elite mage, GLaDOS. 5-star great mage, Aquizard. 6-star sage, Rompage. 7-star sage, Sage Shin. In the end, Lin was unable to achieve his original dream. He had only reached the level of a 5-star magician, and only 2 people in the entire history of the Empire had reached the 6-star level known as a sage. And already, even about them, it could be said that they had reached the truth. If he hadn't left with Esther, he would most likely have reached 6-star level. Then he would have grown old and died. However, he would have regretted for the rest of his life the fact that he had stayed behind instead of going on adventures with her and the others. Even if someone could turn back time, he would never have chosen a different path, but would have gone traveling with Esther again and again. But now Esther was gone. Esther had hoped that this world was filled with laughter. Lin, on the other hand, wonders, the world they so desperately defended altogether, is it really what Esther would have wanted it to be? Those who reach the end of magic, which is truth, can see the true face of this world. Therefore, in this life, he decided to set the same goal as before, to become a 7-star magician without fail, to take a moment out of the sadness and emptiness left by the sudden loss of his dearest friends. Stopping once again in front of the monument of great heroes, he decides to try the vivacious Esther. who was forever trying to pull him into some adventure and show him something new, always stopping her Frida, who didn't understand Esther's enthusiasm for it. As always, the silent friend Caius, and of course the grumpiest of them all, the hero himself, Lin. Each of their group had their own quirks. They seemed strange to many at one time, but Lin really enjoyed traveling with them. Now, however, he must let go of Esther, Kais and Frida and say goodbye to them. For the dead must stay in the past and cannot be with you. For the living, following the flow of time, must move into the future. So the recently awakened magician, who now also has a new name, must take a step into this future, prepared for him by fate itself, and so began his second life. Esther called out to him, asking him about his family, and if he ever regretted having a family. But Lin replied that he hadn't. He didn't even know his mom's face. He had grown up in the northern slums. If the headmaster Osiris hadn't noticed his talent for magic and taken him in, he would have lived on as an orphan and died on the streets, so he didn't even know what a family was, and he wasn't really interested in it. His words moved Frida, so she put her arm around the poor man. However, Lin, breaking out of her embrace, only snapped at Frida, noting that even if he had a family, he just wouldn't know how to deal with it. Therefore, he didn't need a family or anything like it. To which Esther, with her good-natured smile, told him that it wasn't as complicated as he had imagined in his head, and that he should just treasure them. After all, he is a kind child, and so he would surely succeed. That smile will be remembered for a long time. But then someone shouted that it was morning, and Master Rain had to get up. Well, it was just a dream with memories of the past. The maid who had called him informed him that since he was awake, she would prepare breakfast. After stretching a little in one direction or the other, he decided to walk over to the mirror and take a look at himself, or rather, at his new body. It had already been 20 days since the memories of his past life came back to this spoiled 9-year-old boy. This boy is Rain, the eldest son of the Ludwig family, one of the 5 great magician families of the Empire. What a funny situation. He's an orphan and reborn into a noble family, so he had to work tirelessly to adjust to his new life. He went to his mother's house, where he was greeted by the maid and his mother, who told him to go to his father and tell him that breakfast was ready. After all, his father would be pleased if he came. Refusal was naturally not accepted, and so he stood before his father again. In a family he had never been able to get used to or understand what it was. Rain's father, Kevin Ludwig, notices him and immediately wonders, what's he doing? Didn't get enough sleep? He has a kind of unimportant complexion, and that he looks kind of tired after traveling. New Rain doesn't know how to react to a situation like this, so he just tells him that Mom told him to tell him that breakfast is ready. The father, on the other hand, was happy that his son came to him just for that. But he has to eat first, and that means that the father turns out not to eat breakfast, which the boy voices. But suddenly, Rain notices on the table suspiciously interesting symbols on the paper. He asks his father, "Is it magic?" His father tells him that the presentation is next week, so he's in a bit of a hurry, and that's why he took his time at breakfast after Rain called him. After all, eating makes his head foggy, so he tries to focus and get as much done as possible in the morning hours. It's even as if Rain is disappointed. It turns out his father is stuck on this, so Rain offers his help to his father. The naive father assumes that he wants to support him. However, Rain denies it and says he wants to help solve the magic circle. The father is still amused by the flippant words thrown by his son and should get going, or his mom will scold him if he keeps him here, so he should head out for breakfast. However, Rain picks up a brush, saying, while painting in passing, that magic is to express natural laws numerically and then distort them. The Go rune complicates the equation and conflicts with the Cha rune, so it's better to replace it with the Gu rune. And then, using equation 41-2, you can immediately get the answer. The father shockingly grabs the paper and asks his son, but as if to himself, is such a method possible? This was a difficult problem that even the best scholars in the Empire couldn't solve. And after all, it was a spell that was about 200 years old. Therefore, there was no way he could understand how his son was able to solve it. If this spell was restored, it could protect many people from natural disasters, such as floods or landslides. And how could Rain, a youngster who had just mastered basic magic, be able to do such a thing? Judging from his knowledge of basic magic, Rain is quite an ordinary person. However, considering that he belonged to the Ludwig family's mage lineage, it meant that he had not inherited a talent for magic. Father was sinking deeper and deeper into contemplation, but Rain snapped him out of his thoughts, saying that he could go eat breakfast now. Father came to some conclusions of his own, and was happy for Rain. And now they could finally go and have breakfast. Rain's family was actually small, just his mother, father, and 6-year-old sister. The little girl who decided to peek through the door this afternoon and was his sister was Siri. She had shimmering black hair that looked like Sheol and red eyes. She was a cute girl who was able to inherit the physical traits of the Ludwig family, just like Rain. So while she thought no one could see her, Rain turned her head in her direction. Suddenly realizing that she was discovered while she was peeking, she instinctively ran away. Though even for that, Rain had an explanation. After all, after digging through Rain's memories, he found that he had never been kind to his sister. Instead of being cold-blooded, he was simply indifferent to everything. While reading the book, casually pondering this situation, Esther's words caught up with him again, that he must keep them safe, and he shouldn't run away, because in this world it seems like everyone is always busy, that he was a good child, and that he would do well. Oh, that damn thing Esther said, it couldn't help but annoy him. Fine, he'll at least give it a try. So Rain decides to call his sister, who was still hiding behind the door, and tells her that he will teach her magic. The sister is puzzled. She peeks through the doorway and doesn't understand a thing. What's going to happen next? However, Rain, with obvious annoyance in her voice, says that maybe she just wants to play together. This freaks Siri out again and she runs off, to which Rain complains that these kids are incredibly difficult to deal with. However, as it turns out, his sister didn't run away. She just ran to get the item she needed. So she ends up coming back with a book with a great title, 1-Star Basic Formulas. Rain praised her that she was already 6 years old, and she turned out to be fascinated by such books. Siri immediately glowed at such words. After all, it seems like she's glad that her brother finally praised her. Siri couldn't help but remind him of his time with Esther, who was also quite inquisitive, like asking if he knew the meaning of the name of this flower, or how she tried to tell him the magnificent story of one cliff when he was almost asleep. Lynn always complained that Esther treated him like a child, but he actually loved those moments more than anything else in the world. And now his sister was sitting on his lap, and he was asking her what part of what was written in the book that she did not understand. To which she said, here and here, so she didn't understand it from the beginning, and she confirms, of course, okay. Now he has more patience, so he can explain it to her. Asking if she's ever played house before, Siri says she has. A thatched house, a brick house. Depending on what kind of house you build, the materials change. In magic, the magic figure fulfills that role. The shape of the magic figure determines the attribute of magic. If you draw a triangle, it will be the attribute of fire. The shape of a fan is the attribute of wind. So this magic figure shown in the book is for magic with the attribute of wind. But the sister is only pleased, exclaiming, "Wow, wind!" The next step is the runes. The runes determine the effect of the magic. The sister continued to listen to him with such enthusiasm and interest. Runes are magical words. Yule means to bind and Ho means to dispel. For example, if you engrave the Yule rune on a triangular magic square, it turns it into a spell to bind the attribute of fire, and it actually uses mathematical formulas to do so. However, the girl doesn't understand what other math is involved. Which surprises Rain. How can she not know it? But she wants to know. What kind of math is that? The guy only sighs. After all, he has to explain this as well. But under the pressure of Siri's gaze, who seeks knowledge and is interested in everything, he decides to give up and continue. Yule needs a quadratic equation, but he decides to give up and start from the very basics. Start with addition and subtraction. Even the servants have begun to notice that Mr. Rain has completely changed. After all, before, when Lady Seri was crying, he simply didn't care about this prank. But after returning from the square, even his gaze had changed. When their mother and father discovered them, they were just incredibly happy. After all, they had captured such a scene where Rain had fallen asleep, and his sister Sari had also fallen asleep on his lap. Mom even wanted to depict this scene in a painting to better remember it. Dad would also like to do it, however. By the time the painter arrives, the kids might already be awake. Besides, Siri is so shy, so it might be too much. Suddenly, Father's gaze found something interesting. The book his daughter brought, and also the sheet they were studying something on, and it was all scribbled. The father immediately realized that Rain was teaching Siri magic. Father also noticed a strong change in Rain, for after returning from the square, it was like he was a different person to him. Mother has also seen it too, that he has become more mature. Mom is frightened by this sudden change. She even speculates that he might be possessed by the abyss. But Father reassures his wife, saying that she and he are very much alike. After all, the man had a similar experience. When he was a student, he had the honor of meeting Lord Lin. At that time, he boasted that he had become a 3-star mage, but during the war, Lord Lin had risen to 5 stars. Therefore, he realized that living in the peaceful era that the heroes had created, he was too complacent. And maybe after Rain familiarized himself with the story, then he had the same thoughts. When they decided to leave the children and not disturb their sleep, after leaving the room, the wife asks her husband, "Was Lord Lin really frozen in time?" The husband confirmed it, for Lord Lin was so perfectly skilled in ice magic that he remained as he was in his 18 years. The woman asks her husband to tell more of the story, but the husband stops her curiosity. For even if he wanted to, he can't do it, because he doesn't know anything else. But the man also points out that the ice was also Esther's magic, and only Lord Lin and Lady Esther were able to awaken it, and it seems Esther was still waiting for his awakening. For she left a letter, for in the letter she said it was for him, that he would come back, for him who would come from afar. The man also shared with his wife that Rain was an incredible genius, and that he could very well reach the level of a sage. And he told about today's incident, how their son had solved a magic square that he had been struggling with for over a year, and the son just looked at it this morning and solved it immediately. The woman is surprised, and now realizes why her husband was able to make it to breakfast, despite the urgency of work. The father begins to make long-range plans, deciding to try to start training Rain in the family magic. After all, their son, Rain, might even be able to become a magnificent thief mage who reads and steals all magic. This is only allowed to those who belong to the great Ludwig family, because it is an amazing magic, only available to those who belong to their lineage. However, his father is not sure if he can teach him this magic well. After all, it is very difficult, so the woman wonders, how does he plan to teach it to him then? But after all, he is not an inexperienced youngster already, but the head of the family. So, he already has an idea on how to teach Rain their family magic. Under the blue sky, a dazzling field of tulips stretches to the horizon. This is Siastulika, a beautiful region that is famous for its tulips. A third of the land in this region belonged to the Ludwig family, and it is here in the grass, with a bored look, gazing up at the sky on his back, that Rain lies, who of course is having a nice time and the weather is amazing. But he needs to develop, to set medium and long-term goals for himself, especially if it's to get to the truth. So he has to get up. To become a 7-star magician, you have to do a lot of work, and here it does not matter how young you are. Wasting time is clearly not a good idea. First of all, you have to compile a guide. However, just as he was about to do this, as the back has already crept up too curious sister, who is very curious about what it is going to do her brother, and this overly curious nature of his sister can't help but annoy him. Rain was going to summon a magic guide. He even decided to ask if he could make a guide for her as well. Siri's happiness was unbounded. Just rays of goodness and happiness were spreading from her in all directions. And Rain's stony face at that moment. Siri was spinning on the grass from the whole event. Even the aloof Rain noticed that she was enjoying herself. But to him, her, a 6-year-old child, her speech seemed a bit clumsy. And maybe there was something wrong with it. They got down to business, and the older brother began to explain to his sister how to do it. The shape of the magic circle is a polygon. The runes for the inscription are Ju, Yu, Du, and J. This is a high-level magic that contains 4 different elements, so only a 4-star mage can handle it. And at the moment, only 10 mages in the country can use this kind of magic. But then Rain continued to show the bewildered sister. And then a huge pillar of energy flew up into the sky from the sheet Rain was writing on. The sister was just thrilled, but the guy's nose was bleeding, and he suddenly grabbed his chest. He felt incredibly sick and covered in cold sweat. And then he realized what was wrong. Using this kind of magic for his body was still too much, and his body couldn't bear such a load. For a second, he was even glad that it was a guider spell. After all, if he had used battle magic, he would have definitely parted with his life. This body is just awful. He literally can't use his skills, or else he would die. After wiping his blood from under his nose, he called out to Rudian, and something resembling a butterfly landed on his sister's finger. The magic did not fail, but was able to be performed after all. This incomprehensible creature assesses the user's abilities and determines potential magical power. This is the function of a summoned Rudian. While Rain was telling all this, Seri couldn't even take her eyes off of such an unprecedented creature for a second. The boy continued that Rudian would tell her what to study and what to practice. The Ju rune in the spell guide reports basic magic power, and the Yu rune reports the use of magic, so it contains the best runes for learning. It may show simple, but it's actually 4-star magic. And while he was saying that, continued to flow from his nose, visually confirming the words he said earlier. Seri was ecstatic and didn't even look in the direction of her suffering brother, but focused all her attention on Rudian. She is just thrilled with Rudian and she loves this magic. So he is sending her to further her studies. Of course, the most important thing was to keep her busy so she wouldn't watch and interfere with his business. However, contrary to his plans, he is once again overwhelmed by the payoff of the magic he has done. So before doing other things, he needs to restore his magic power. He can't use the second Rudian right now, so he will summon him later. After a while, after he recovered, he still retried and summoned Rudian, who told him some rather sad news. Rain's magic power was 3024, and that's even lower than that of a novice magician. After that, the guy decided to do a calculation of magic and stamina. Rudian gave out the following data. Magic calculation is 77. Stamina 64. Yeah, that's some harsh data. He has quite a long way to go to raise his magic stats. Rudian detected a pedigree of magic in him that is rated as teachable. Belsidious, Belcurious. Finally an interesting find for today for Rain. Ludwig family magic. And this body didn't turn out to be complete garbage. When he was traveling with Esther, a young mage came to him. This mage wanted to prove himself the best mage of all the mages in the Empire, and join this strongest group by taking Lin's place. But there was nothing special about his skills, so Lin simply destroyed him without blinking an eye. There was nothing special about him, but this young mage's gazes did not give Lin any rest. This mage suddenly rose up and used the magic that Lin had used against him. In fact, with his own eyes, he had seen all the magic that Lin had used, and when Lin tried to check by using another magic, that mage also used that magic as if he had copied it. He could only counterattack. Only now did the boy realize that that young mage was using the Ludwig family's bloodline magic, Belsidious. Just by observing the flow of magic, he could tell which magic the opponent was using. If their magic skills are equal, the advantage goes to the one who uses it better. Also Belcurious, a legendary eye that has only been opened by 3 people in the entire magical history of the Empire. If Belsidious is the ability to recognize an opponent's magic, Belcurious is the ability to steal it. This is why among magicians, the Ludwig family is known as magician thieves. All thanks to that extraordinary eye. Finally, that very childhood goal had been achieved. However, still, without magical strength and stamina, he can't become a great mage. So the path ahead is quite arduous. When Rain decides to spend time, for his favorite pastime, reading books about magic and the world in the library, his father comes to him with an unexpected question. Is he interested in his family's lineage of magic? Rain even panicked. Was his father really watching him? Regardless, his father states that although it's early, maybe Rain still wants to try to learn. Since Rain thinks it wouldn't hurt to learn the theory, he of course immediately agrees. Then his father decides that Elin will be Rain's mentor from now on. But that's only while father is at the academy. When father returns, he will personally teach his son. Digging into his memory, the guy still couldn't remember or at least latch onto a memory of who Elin was. His father wants to reassure him, saying that she's a wonderful person and also teaches at Delon and has great magical talent. And of course, this Aunt Elin loves her nephew more than anything in the world, and that he met her when he was 6 years old. And the same Aunt Elin suddenly shows up, shocking Rain, and she has the most displeased look on her face. She walks up to Rain, and after a second, she starts grumbling that this is ridiculous. How she, a genius professor, was called to come, just to teach a not the least bit cute kid. To say that Rain is shocked is an understatement. This is definitely the one who likes him more than anyone else in the world. Without giving him time to think, Elin immediately grabs his head and asks, "Is he ready to learn?" She also asks if he knows who she is. Rain replies that she is Elin's aunt. At this point, the instruction went on, that from now on he must communicate to her as Professor Elin Ludwig, the great genius. She can't stand dull-witted people who don't get it right the first time, and that he should never ask questions after she's taught him once. And did he understand everything? And it was under such circumstances and at such a moment that Rain's training in the Ludwig family's bloodline magic began. Ancestral magic is not recorded anywhere, lest it be stolen by other mages, and so it is necessary to meet a mage from the family and directly get the knowledge into her mind. At the very beginning of her training, she decides with unconcealed irritation to demonstrate magic, and so he finally saw that magic, those same incredible eyes of Elin's mentor. It was the same feeling he had experienced the moment he met that young mage. Belsidius, the eyes had piqued Rain's interest. Therefore he admired it even out loud, to which the teacher reacted as if that was the way it should be, because she had done something incredible and let her continue to praise it. But that wasn't enough, and she literally started praising herself. That it's incredibly cool. To use Belsidius, you have to figure out 3 spells at once, and he figured out what 3? So someone like him can only dream of using that. She was literally mocking the child. Oh, great mentor Elin. However, Rain suddenly said that he could do it, but to her, those words, just the words of an arrogant youngster. Since Elin was satisfied with his reaction, she wrote down a few formulas, and then she handed these sheets to me, and that was the analysis of magic. After looking at the sheets, he felt that there was more theory than he expected, and if the founder of the Ludwig family didn't impose genetic restrictions, then he could use it as well. The mentor continued to taunt the boy, that it was too complicated for him to even attempt it. Oh, and he has no idea what the inscriptions even mean. But the boy berated her, thinking that he just needed time to roughly understand this information. She found it offensive, which is probably why she has no choice, and so she'll make an exception for him. But suddenly, the guy thanks her for pointing him in the right direction, and he'll figure it out on his own from there. Elin was literally speechless at such words coming out of this young man's mouth. And while he sat down to study the spells written by her, she froze like a stone, not even knowing how to react to this situation. Finally, coming out of her stupor, she asked again, "Did she hear correctly? He doesn't need her instruction?" And let him not ignore her. But Rain was already immersed in studying spells and stopped noticing what was going on around him. Therefore, the answer to Elin's exclamations was only silence. In the end, this whole situation infuriated the great professor, and she declared that he should do as he pleased, as if this kid would ever be able to do such a thing. But she wouldn't teach him, even if he came back and tearfully begged her. Finally, she took a chair and sat down next to him at the same table, and began to read her book. But time passed. He still did not ask her for anything. And then for one moment he thought for a moment. Elin took the sheet from his hands, and then began to correct something. Then she gave it back to him, and began to read her book again. After a moment he was thinking again. "Prof." Elin took the sheet again and copied something and handed the sheet back to him, which made the guy wonder, is this how modern education works? Or is this how his mentor tests him? Watching this learning from afar was Rain's mom. She seemed to be happy with the way the training was going. After a while, Aylin called a break. She went somewhere else. Apparently, she was just tired of sitting around. And as one woman left, another woman came in. Rain's mom came in, and she decided to point out that Aylin was quite unusual, and that his aunt isn't very honest. After all, from the looks of it, she aims to teach him everything. So even if he already knows something, let him ask his aunt a lot of questions. The woman sank into her memories, that Aylin had been the same when she followed them around, that she was so charming. The boy wonders if the meaning of the word charming has changed in the last 300 years. After a break, classes resumed again. While Aylin was reading a book, she was even humming a tune. Rain glanced at her and caught him looking at his sheet. However, when she saw that she had been caught, she instinctively hid her face behind the book, as if it hadn't happened, and she had been reading the book the whole time. The boy found her very annoying, even more annoying than his 6-year-old sister Seri. Finally, he decided to give up. He decided to call his aunt and asked her to kindly explain this part, since he supposedly didn't understand. She was confused at first, but he got what he should have expected by saying those words. The great Professor Aylin immediately launched into a tirade and ridicule about how he didn't even know that, and that the Ludwig family is clearly doomed, and let him show him where he can't make progress, then shows him how to solve it, and that there's no problem now if you solve it like this, and continues the taunts, that if he uses this formula, he can solve it much faster, and he didn't even know it. Rain apologizes, but Aylin can't stop now. She thinks he doesn't know anything. What did he do before 9? The boy only admits that she's right. Then how could he solve the problem? Even though the boy knew what he was doing, this behavior was wearing him down. But so be it. The great Aylin would make an exception for him, and it's the very last exception, and it's only for him. If he asked again, then she would just... But Rain interrupted her with his own suggestion. But she once again made the last exception, and continued to make exceptions and smug sneers. Aylin's teaching was constantly like this. It required quite a bit of effort, but thanks to her, Rain greatly reduced the time spent on learning theory and gained practical experience. On the 10th day after receiving Aylin's instructions, he finally felt a burning pain in his retina. This pain in his eyes, his head felt like it was ready to explode. It felt like all the blood in his body was rushing to his head. The world slowly turned a blood-red color, and that's when it happened. His eyes, glowing red, were engraved with the mark of death. He saw some numbers around him. Everything seemed to be transforming into numbers. All the information about everything in the universe was coming into his brain in the form of formulas. Is this what it's like to be the creator of the world? Was the first thought that popped into his head. He had seen what magic really looked like. Only now did he realize that back then, in the young wizard's eyes, all his magic seemed to look like numbers, and that really seemed amazing to him. Hearing the approaching footsteps, he turned around and looked with his newly acquired red eyes at the one who approached him. It turned out to be his mentor, Aylin. Seeing the boy, she was unusually shocked, for she immediately noticed his shining eyes. And how did he manage to do that in just a measly 10 days? Even getting a special education. It took Aylin a whole 7 years to master Belsidius. Her eyes hurt so mercilessly, blood was pouring out of her eyes. She was covered in sweat. She wanted to cry, but she tried. She had been told it would take 70 years to master Bel Curious, and this boy did it in 10 days, from scratch, knowing nothing, to using multiple spells at once. She was too shocked, thinking that he could rival even Lin, who was called the master of simultaneous summoning. Maybe that guy is, but that's where her thoughts cut off. The father getting all this about his son is also surprised. To awaken Belsidius in just 10 days. But Aylin already has long-range plans for Rain, because thanks to him, the Ludwig family may become the leading family of mages, and that he is truly amazing. After saying that, Aylin left Kevin's office. The man, based on the report he received, feels that he has nothing more to teach him. So he calls his servant, named Yudes. He immediately appears in front of the head of the family. Kevin orders the servant to send a message to Kaein's father, the former head of the clan. And though a hitch comes out with the servant about sending the letter, Kevin asks for the message to be sent, for his father to guide his grandson, who has an innate talent, and to add an hour that he respectfully asks him to do so. Kevin and his father don't seem to have a very good relationship. Even the servant says Kevin would go through fire and water for his son. The servant reports that he will act as ordered, calling the man Your Excellency. Meanwhile, spring has ended and a short summer has arrived. This summer seemed to have been over for about a year. Dark clouds covered the continent, pouring down rain day after day. It's summer, and yet that summer he was incredibly busy. During the day, he was always learning some sort of household magic from Elin, who even threw chalk at him, a very hot-tempered woman, and his mom would sometimes drop by to see how he was doing. He also taught Siri the basics of magic whenever he could, showing her all kinds of magic like magic tricks, which couldn't help but bore him. At night, he focused on training both physical and magical strength, pulling the same stones tied to a rope. The development of modern magic that he had learned from Elin and from books was truly astonishing. For him, a man who had lived 300 years ago, it was incredibly shocking. The formulas were greatly reduced. The activation time was also reduced, but the power had increased. The level of magic had increased greatly when compared to the level from 300 years ago. It turns out that now he, that great 5-star mage Lin, could lose to a modern 4-star mage. Magic grows and progresses with time. Therefore, with his current state, becoming a 7-star magician in this era is absolutely impossible. It requires incredible strength and knowledge. After realizing all this, one day during a meal, he told his father that he had a request. He asked his father to send him to the city of magicians and that it would take about 3 years to learn. His parents' eyes widened to the size of a coin, and his sister asked if he was going somewhere, and he confirmed it. He went on to tell me more about his plans, that he wanted to go to the Golden Rose in the City of Magicians. There is the best magical university there, Delon. He asked his father if he would send him, but his sister had a dead grip on him and told him that he would never go there, and he can't go. Dad's against it too. He has to think about his age. He's only 10 years old, so it's too early for him to leave home, because children from magical families enter Delon when they turn 16. Then it's not too late to go to the City of Magicians. And he also informs her that some very important appointment has already been made, but the sister is adamantly against it. There is no way she will let her brother leave now. However, the man informs that a letter has arrived from Rain's grandfather and consequently his father. Even Elin, who was eating meat, froze with a piece of meat in her mouth. As a result, she choked on it. She too was shocked at the turn of events with the letter. The head of the family says that in their Ludwig family, only 3 people have awakened Bel Curious. But it's like Rain already knew about it, he guessed. The one who awakened Bel Curious is Scalzi Ludwig. Kevin had informed Rain that his grandfather would personally pave the way for him to master Bel Curious. And that's why he can't go to the City of Mages in the first place. After all, he must meet his grandfather first. His sister immediately started crying while tucking herself into her mother's skirt. Setting off on his journey, he arrives at his grandfather's extraordinarily grand and beautiful castle. In a horse-drawn carriage, he goes straight to his grandfather, who is already waiting for him. As soon as Rain enters the room, the old man sees him with the corner of his eye and instantly uses magic. Rain doesn't understand what has gotten into his grandfather's head and what he's going to do. However, the old man suddenly creates a pretty powerful spell and starts walking towards Rain, preparing to attack. So there's nothing left for the guy but to cast aside all distractions and engage. And he creates a couple spells in response. But suddenly, to Rain's shock and fear, the spells in his hands disappear. It's as if they never existed. Then the old man explains to him that it is Bel Curious, and that it can control visible magic at will. And the old man shows him his activated eyes, and asks him if he wants to try it too, and then he removes the activated eyes, adding that mastering Bel Curious isn't everything. To use it properly, the master must fully understand it. Wondering what level Rain is at right now, the guy has finally met someone interesting to him, and immediately tells him that he can barely make a speed calculation of the 3rd-star spell, though he leaves in his thoughts the fact that he can actually handle spells up to 5 stars. Grandfather is shocked, as it's almost surprising, a 3-star spell at such an age. However, Bel Curious requires immense magical power. Therefore, in his current state, he still has a long way to go. But Rain doesn't give up after all, it's only a long way. The old man is puzzled, and the guy continues. So it's a long way, not impossible, and with incredible enthusiasm, asks his grandfather to lead him to this level. The old man is very surprised to see such a boy, and agrees to teach him, saying that his training will be very hard, and that he should learn properly. Kevin is not surprised by the whole situation. Grandpa, on the other hand, apologizes for his first greeting being too rude, and that he sincerely welcomes them both. He even offers his son to have a drink with him after they confirm Rain's suitability. And this finally surprises Kevin, and he bowed to his departing father after those words, and as a sign of respect. Rain didn't seem to know where his enthusiasm would lead. His grandfather attacked him again and again, telling him that he should be able to use Bell Curious fluently, and that he should read the spell quickly now and not screw up. But Rain doesn't make it in time, and magic flies at him, which he dodges. Why is the old man yelling at him that he's going to just stand there and watch his opponent's spell activate or something? He should act faster. However, in his thoughts, Grandpa is just ecstatic. That Rain is truly an amazing talent. He teaches him one thing, and he learns 100, not even 1,000. A genius who learns in one go what it would take others a month to learn, and that his grandson has only a little left to learn the use of the eyes and develop magic. Continuing his admonition, he says that during his training, Rain must risk his life to progress significantly. The boy slicing circles around his grandfather understands all this. Then the old man decides on a gamble. He's going to release a fireball, and if the grandson doesn't dodge, he'll die. The boy is a little taken aback at first, but he immediately got into a stance as if to say, "Attack!" The old man uses the fireball, and Rain activates Bell Sidious. The fireball is already out and approaching too fast. Even Grandpa is already starting to get worried, telling Rain to hurry up. Mastering his opponent's magic with Bell Sidious and manipulating it with Bell Curious, the fireball came close, Grandpa already yelling Rain's name at the top of his lungs, and then the guy's eyes bled. His eyes finally transforming into the right shape. The fireball was just a set of numbers. He saw it so clearly and distinctly now. Bell Curious has been activated. The universe had been converted into equations and fed directly into his brain. Now he needed to change the formulas to his liking. There is too little time left. We need to hurry. The magic array consists of 2 triangles. The designated runic symbol is the Rutichan formula. Size, 17 axles. The range is 23 kilometers. He stretched out his arm, numbers enveloping him everywhere. And here was the solution to the equation. Like an imaginary root, already actually reaching his hand, the fireball broke apart and seemed to burst from within. Grandpa was too surprised, and the guy was overtaken by a monstrous recoil. His body collapsed as if he had lost all his strength, and he began to fall. But the grandfather managed to arrive in time to pick him up and prevent Rain from falling. And even being in such a state, he asks his grandfather something to the effect that he was able to do it. It's like the old man is the best cheerleader in the world, that it was great, and that now he just needed to increase his magic power. He couldn't believe that his grandson at only 14 years old was able to awaken Bell Curious. After all, he himself had barely reached that level only when he was 39 years old. Therefore, he thinks that his grandson might be able to rewrite the history of the Empire. After Rain had rested for a while, Grandfather addressed him that he didn't want to interfere in his life, but he would like that. When Rain turned 16, he would definitely go to Delon for training. But Rain himself is no longer excited about the idea, because he is no longer interested in it. His grandfather, however, says that if he graduates from the university at the highest level, then he will have a chance to meet Archmage Lin. The grandson, though, accepts the grandfather's admonition, but informs him that he is not very interested in this, and it's time to stop this bullying of the dead already. And the grandfather felt the same way. But there is something important, because the heroine Esther left a letter. And why isn't Rain interested in what he wrote about? That's how Rain found out that his beautiful Esther left as if he inherited this peaceful sky above his head. But also some mysterious letter, and how can he predict it? Grandfather informs him that no one of Rain's age has ever awakened Bell Curiosity, so he thinks that with Rain's abilities, he may well be able to read this letter. At that moment, Rain, aka Lin in the past, was too dumbfounded from the information he heard and could only listen idly. Looking back, he could definitely say that that was when it all started. That was when this whole story of his journey began, traveling the path of his former comrades, following Esther's letter. It had not been long since he had returned home, but now he was traveling again. It's about half a year until the Delon entrance exams. So he decided to take this opportunity to explore the world and visit different places when he goes to the south. His family wishes him success in his journey. His sister Seri is still angry with him. His father wonders, does Rain plan to stay in the magical city after his exams? The boy, of course, confirms, for this is the place where all knowledge is gathered. At the end of the year is the notoriously difficult Delon entrance exam. Those who pass it, however, begin their first semester in March, so Rain will have a lot of time after taking the exam, because he doesn't even expect to fail. His mom's worried about him, and she's kind of scared to send her boy alone on the road without even providing security. However, his father tries to reassure her by saying that Rain's skills are exceptional as it is, so there will be no danger if he follows the known path, and after that, Rain finally sets off on his adventure. Someday, when he looks back, will he be able to call this conversation a memory? On the 15th day of his journey, he arrived in the southern part of the Holy Empire, the Jerem region. This small town had many inns and taverns. Also, what was surprising to Rain was that all the people passing by were wearing bamboo hats. So he decided to ask a passerby, "Why is everyone wearing bamboo hats?" To which he replied that didn't he know about Lin's caravan? And though the kid looks smart, there's still a lot he doesn't know. A long time ago, their first leader received help from Archmage Lin. That's why they've been wearing bamboo hats in gratitude ever since. And the youngster must be impressed by that. After all, this is a trade group with such a great history. The boy who used to be that Archmage Lin plunged into memories, but he still couldn't think of anything like that, and who that first leader was. Perhaps if he had heard the name, he might have remembered. He was more curious as to why such respected merchants were stuck in such a small town. The man, however, reported that there was a problem on the road that led to the sunlit highway. Ferocious monsters appeared there, and dozens of people ended up missing. So they have no choice but to wait for the Lord's forces to come and destroy them. And they wonder what their trading partners will say because of the whole situation. Monsters are creatures whose essence has been warped by the abyss. They look like animals, but have a much more grotesque appearance and incredibly dangerous magical abilities. And no matter how many times they are destroyed, they never disappear. Rain's getting all hot and bothered. The damn monsters were getting upset again. As long as it's not a top-level monster, it won't be dangerous to him. So he's going on his way. The merchant wishes him a good journey. At night, during his walk through the bamboo forest, he felt that someone is watching him, but just watching, and not preparing to attack. In Rain's opinion, it probably sensed the difference in magic power. It works like a beast instinct. It can handle monsters of this level, however, he believes that it is not his concern. The monster extermination team that had already been summoned would take care of it. This whole situation reminded him of his last trip, how they argued about which way to go. And Esther decided to go overland, follow the Belisor River, and head for Terwinop. After all, there is an amazing flower field along the river, so why don't they stop by along the way? However, all of this infuriated the ever-grumpy Lin, so he yelled at them, "What are they doing anyway?" After all, the two groups of warriors who had come to the continent before them had been wiped out fighting at the front. Because of this, the front line has stalled, and they are barely hanging on, waiting for help from the heroes. His company are all stone-faced. Do they even realize the importance of this situation? Of course he knows that the Red Dragon Legion and the Yellow Dragon Legion are heading to the battlefield, and all the strong mercenaries have crossed the sea for honor and glory. And that's why they need to hurry up as well. That's why he's saying that, because when all the strong ones left, the monsters started running all over the continent, as if they were waiting for this moment, and at best, they are danger level C, maybe B, so they don't have time to deal with such things. To all these outbursts, the great heroine Esther lambasted the screaming youngster. After all, there are many people in this world who are desperate for help, even for what seems to him to be nothing. There is absolutely no difference in asking for help. She hopes that he will become exactly the kind of adult who will help such people. Even though he died 300 years ago, those words still stay with him. Damn Esther! And how to leave quietly now? Her words still annoyed him. He thundered that he needed to rest, or he was too tired. He then summoned a search spell and told him to find the monster. All the animals in the forest were consumed with fear because of the frightening and bloodthirsty atmosphere that emerged. When the monster was found, then Rain ordered to bring it to him. The monster had a huge mouth and many eyes. However, right now it couldn't even move. The guy had exterminated countless monsters. Then destroying a monster like this is not difficult for him. Although the monster is just a mindless animal driven by instinct, and it wouldn't even realize what Rain had told it. Without blinking an eye, he destroyed the monster, stating that it was just out of boredom and not because of the very words of Esther that had traveled with him these 300 years. Afterward, he continued on his way as if nothing had happened. This was how he reached the border between the central and southern regions of the empire. As Rain remembered, this place was called the Badantio mountain range. As soon as he stepped on it, the monsters rushed towards him in a huge stream. But how dare a lowly beast look down on him? But suddenly arrows flew from behind his back and shot exactly at the target, at the monsters that were trying to attack Rain. He was puzzled. But when he turned around, he saw people with bows. And among those archers, one seemed familiar to him at first sight. He couldn't even hold back and asked a question. Was Kai's in front of him? The monsters have already managed to surround Rain, so the guy he called Kai's jumps down already. The man asks the guy if he's okay. But Rain smells the odor of alcohol, and a man with green hair and a red face appeared in front of him. The man was definitely drunk. The man states that monsters frequent this place and didn't the guy warn anyone on the way here. At these admonitions, a second guy comes down and calms him down. After all, why would anyone warn anyone? They are the descendants of the Great Ones and guard this place. This guy was also clearly drunk. Looking at the green-haired guy, Rain finally realizes and sighs in relief, because it definitely can't be his friend Kai's. Rain doesn't know what school the guys are from, but they've been very helpful to him. So he decides to thank them. Since he has the chance to ask, he asks the guys if he has reached the Badantio mountain range or not yet. The question seemed strange to the guys, as they even looked at each other after hearing that. Then the guys laughed out loud when they realized what they had just heard. Rain doesn't realize what's wrong at all, and so in a very disgruntled voice asks the guys why they're laughing. One of the guys explains to the old traveler that it has been quite some time since the mountain range stopped being called Badantio and became Kislantin, which is why they were surprised that Rain called the mountain range Badantio. Kislantin means the mountain range of Kai's palace. It seems like quite a lot has changed since then. After defeating Abyss, Caius seems to have put down roots in this place. The two guys who kindly greeted Rain turned out to be students of the archery school founded by Caius. According to tradition, this passage where they were located was guarded by those recognized by the headmaster of the school. However, looking at the guys who were goofing around on each other, as well as their current state, the guy is even amused. After all, is drunken archery really the core skill of this school? He even wonders why exactly these guys were assigned here and what they did for it. One of the guys puts his arm around Rain and informs him that he has come at the right time since today is the festival. On this day, everyone can drink free alcohol, and if a guy wants to be an adult, he should try to drink it. In their place, everyone knows that this drink is the way to the sun and moon. Fake Kies even notices that he is a cultured man. Fake Caius informs the second guy that despite the festival, let him not think that he can miss his shift today by engaging in chit-chat, and also tells him to concentrate, since despite the festival, they have to guard the place they were entrusted with. However, the guy complains, because how can you let a toddler like Rain go alone? The guy finds it unacceptable. The guy is determined to escape during the festival from his post, so he grabs Rain by the collar and promises the fake Caius that he will only take Rain to the entrance of the village and then come right back. After a while, the guide boy and Rain find themselves in a forest where it was so bright all around from the leaves changing color. Rain wonders if the road is hidden because of the fallen leaves or not. The guy smugly informs her that they clean up the leaves, but this year there are so many leaves that it takes forever to even clean them up. The guy explains the way forward, that if Rain goes up the wooden stairs, he will find the training room. And if Rain wants to go straight down the path, he can get to the village. When he looked at the tombstone in front of him, which was at the fork of the road in a pile of fallen leaves, he couldn't tear his gaze away and was speechless for a while. After all, it was the grave of his dear friend Kai's. How could he react any other way? The guy tells Rain that if he's going somewhere, why don't he stop and make a wish first? Rain doesn't realize what is being asked of him. Guy is a little shocked that Rain doesn't know anything. However, he makes allowances for Rain's age and thinks that is why he doesn't know anything. Rain still doesn't understand what the guard is trying to tell him. However, upon hearing the guy's words, Rain was too surprised, for it turned out to be the tomb of Kaya's palace. Usually people make a wish here. They say for Kayas to please protect them this year as well. Rain asks his guide not to joke about this, but the guy doesn't understand why his words were taken as a joke. Rain then explains to the guy that it seems strange to him, and he doesn't understand why someone would build a tomb in the middle of a mountain. Plus, Kayas is a hero. The guide is even more surprised by the fact that Rain doesn't know the history of Kai's tomb. He even wonders if Rain is from this country, since he hasn't heard about it. Well, it seems the traveler needs to find out what's what. Then the guy tells him that among Kai's comrades was an archimage named Lin. He even hopes that at least this is information Rain knows, thinking back that it's a known fact, and that most likely Rain should definitely know it. So here he's heard talk of Lin being very shy. Again, he is mentioned so casually. The guy says that the hero Kai's believed that Lin would come back even after he died. Rain is greatly surprised at the words he just said. However, the guy didn't stop and continued the story that he heard that if the grave was in the village, then Lin after a long time wouldn't be able to come because he was shy. That is why Kayas asked to be buried in that particular place. All these warm words about his dear friend, who even at the threshold of death took care of Lin, make him remember the past good days they spent together. Once, when they stopped to rest, Lin complained that Kai's reeked of alcohol and was disturbing him with his snoring. Or how they got into another mess, and at the end Kayas gave the guy a friendly pat on the head like he was a good boy. And the ever-grumpy Lin asked Kayas not to touch his hair. There was also the time and when they got to some weird library where there were a lot of books, and he and Kais were looking at a book together and how one character was spelled. That was also when Kais decided to pet Lin's head again, and Lin grumbled again that he had asked not to touch his head. It was a good memory, the warmth and friendship from it. Rain even unconsciously touches his head, remembering that moment. He even wondered if Kais really knew that it was goodbye forever and that they would never meet again. All these thoughts broke the poor guy. After all, he had promised to come back. His friends were waiting for him so much. Kais was waiting for him to come back. Standing on the grave, Rain even sees a dried-up skeleton, his friend who is still waiting for him, for he promised to return. All this scares the guy a lot, so he couldn't deal with it and panicked and started running away from the coffin, which even surprised the guy who brought Rain here. Rain tried to escape from reality because his friends had been waiting for him all this time and he never came while they were alive. Because he was so panicked and running without looking at his feet, he tripped and fell on the ground and leaves in front of him. So he lay there in that beautiful forest, which shone with different colors, thanks to the leaves on the trees, and where his friend Kais was resting. After a while, Rain sits on the edge of the cliff and ponders his current situation and his past. Looking down, sitting at the edge of the cliff, he was only trying to talk himself back up. He needs to turn around and go to Kai's grave. He is too upset by the sudden realization of it all. However, he needs to pull himself together and say a proper goodbye to the person who was so dear to him, and who thought of him until the day he died. Even if it's too late, he needs to find the strength and let his friends know that he's back. And not just to Kiss, but also to Frida and Esther. He needs to let them know that he is sorry and ask for their forgiveness. In the end, he just fell on his back on the ground. He lay on the cold night ground. A bird flew by in the night, which made the guy remember some moments with his friends again. How Kais had once spotted that bird high in the sky that even Rain had praised his eyesight. Or how Kais was archery and hit the target perfectly right in the center, much to the surprise of his companions. Rain even then wondered how Kais could hit the target so well when he was so drunk. Seeing his condition, Frida even gave him a drink since Kais couldn't hit well when he was sober. The moment when Esther informed him that Kais had no tongue, and that's why he couldn't speak. Yet despite all of this, one night Kais snored so much and it was so noisy that no one could sleep. All these memories leave only a pathetic smile on the guy's face. After all, it was usually quiet, but that night it was very noisy. In front of the eyes of the guy arose only that picture, as his friends were near him to the end and watched him die. It all just made him laugh, but that laugh wasn't kind and warm, or because he was laughing. He only remembered the faces of his friends who looked him straight in the eye until his last breath, and he had died like a weakling and left them alone. And now they were gone. Rain could no longer hold back his emotions. The tears were pouring down, and he couldn't stop them. Only helplessness and regret remained with him. He lay and cried in this beautiful forest, lying on his back on the cold ground under this enchanting moon. After a while he omitted all his regrets, and then he got up and followed to the grave of his dear friend with a determined step. He walked up to the grave, looked at it with a sad look, and then used a spell. Everything around Kai's grave was colored in bright flames of fire. While everything was burning, Rain looked at it all with a sad look. All the leaves, plants and stuff, everything was burned around Kai's grave by Rain's flames. It looks like he wanted to highlight the grave, so it wouldn't be somewhere in the shadows, littered with leaves and all sorts of debris. In his thoughts, he even apologizes to Caius. For all of this is not because he is shy, but only because he lacks courage. He still lacks the courage to face the whole team of friends and apologize to them. How can he face them yet? After all, he is that pathetic slug who couldn't keep the promise he made to them all. So Rain only has to move forward, to gain determination and experience, so that one day he can still meet his friends and ask for their forgiveness. He continued his journey. After a while, he was already remembering that the very south was amazing. Rain was covered with sweat from this terrible heat, from which there was no place to hide. Air conditioners had not been invented yet. Under such a summer and fall sky, Rain finally reached the shiny city where many people flock to, the magical city of Golden Rose. Here in the heart of Golden Rose, Delon University was built. This almost mythical city had been of interest to Rain back in his past life, but from the looks of it, it did not live up to his expectations. Walking through the city, Rain hears a merchant calling attention to his wares, selling books on magic that had just arrived. He also had study guides that were written by experienced magic teachers. Even magic amplification tools were sold here, supposedly a rare item that was found in the dungeon by a silver-ranked adventurer. All knowledge passes through the Golden Rose, a phrase that matched the status of this place, for everything and everyone gathers in this city. People flock to this city in a stream. The stones also interested Rain, so he asks the merchant how much a particular one is worth. The merchant sells them for 10 copper coins. Rain is again surprised that it is so cheap. Only 10 copper coins. He remembered that in past times he had given at least 80 copper coins for this stone. The merchant informs Rain that the bell on the clock tower is ringing, which means the exam is about to begin. Rain makes a quick decision and buys the stone, giving away 10 copper coins. But then he notices someone running through the crowd, shouting for someone to catch the thief. As Rain watches the thief running away, he even assumes that the guards don't seem to be doing a very good job. However, that doesn't bother him, since it's a big city here, so the guards should be able to handle the situation themselves. Besides, Rain needs to rush to the exam hall, but here he runs into some grandmother. The grandmother falls to the ground, and Rain wonders if she's okay. Rain is very late, and by the looks of it, the grandmother is fine. But the grandmother is almost crying by now, because this wasn't for sale, it was their family heirloom. Her grandson needed it for his entrance exam. She just looks at the thief and asks for it back. When the grandmother leaves, Rain doesn't understand why he should even help in this situation. He has an exam too, and now is not the time to be distracted by such things. However, somewhere in the back of his mind, he hears a voice asking him to help his grandmother. It is Esther calling out to him. The guy quickly gave up and approached his grandmother, wondering if the man had stolen something from her. With a rather stern look, he asks the grandmother to wait here for a while. The grandmother is shocked and doesn't understand what's going on at all. It was as if Granny saw the ghost of Esther's heroine in this kid. Despite the fact that he thought about it for a long time, communicating with Grandma and everything else, just by flying into the air, he immediately discovered the thief. Rain was very angry because he already had a lot of things to do, and he also had to deal with this, promising that the robber was about to turn into ashes. But then he heard a voice asking everyone to get out of the way, and then a hand on his shoulder. And like a little kid, he was simply asked to step aside and stay out of the way. Then the stranger uses a spell and a wall of sand forms around the robber. The robber is very frightened when he sees the sand, but he is immediately told that stealing other people's property in Golden Rose is quite brave. But the robber obviously picked the wrong day. The girl informs him that the robber is finished while she stands on the clay sculptures because the robber was caught by a heroine named Krista. The girl has such a smug smile on her face. Seeing the sand, all that confidence coming from the girl, the guy immediately realized who she was. It was the girl from the Warden family. The Warden family is located on the eastern edge of the border. Like the Ludwig family, it is one of the 5 mage families. Before Rain recovered his past memories, they had already met several times at the family meeting. She was always such a screamer, always advising him to put in a little effort, saying that did Rain really enjoy living like an idiot. Always reprimanding him that he's then mage family, even the eldest son, and isn't he ashamed of what he is? Every time they saw each other, the girl was always being clever, so the guy called her a nerd. The guy was curious about something, and that was that the girl was already wearing a uniform, but she had to be the same age as him. The thief finally came to his senses and grinned, and then he tore apart the earth golems the girl had created. A strong stream of wind rushed from the thief's hand towards the girl, and people immediately began to scatter in different directions to avoid being caught in the crossfire. The mom almost lost her son in that wind. He was only helplessly calling out for his mom. Good luck Rain was nearby. He used a spell to catch the boy. When the boy fell into his mother's arms, he cried. He was very frightened to be in such a situation. Rain, meanwhile, jumped on the roof of one of the buildings. He activates his divine eyes that shine so brightly and watches what happens through them. It looks like the thief was a mage too. Using his eyes, he sees that the thief has pretty decent magical power. Looking at the thief's hand, Rain notices that he has a lot of relics on his left hand. The girl isn't the least bit surprised by the thief's agility, and since he's so good, let him try to block her attack. The girl uses her 2 hands, and a glow resembling a cross appears in the middle. The thief certainly didn't expect this turn of events. Rain only thinks that it is pointless to use 2-star magic. But the girl is glowing, as if she was eager to try it out on someone. If the Ludwig family is known as thieving magicians, the Warden family is known as commanding magicians. The Warden family's ancestral magic is earth magic. As if to confirm these words, a huge chunk of earth rushed upwards. The girl's eyes exuded confidence. The girl was so joyful, she was finally being allowed to experience this spell. A huge-sized sand golem appeared in front of the thief. The girl is too arrogant. After summoning it, she asks the thief to brag once more if he is still as brave. However, the thief starts laughing. He raises his left arm up and then declares that he is invincible with this. Some sort of frightening purple-colored spell emanates from his hand. This spell then pierces a huge sand golem. The girl looks at her golem, while the thief laughs at this point. However, not noticing no serious damage to the golem, the girl turns to the thief and begins to taunt him, as he seemed to think the golem would fall from such an attack. The girl states that if he wants to defeat her golem. However, she is not allowed to finish because the golem tries to attack its mistress. The thief is too happy about his victory because the girl only manages to notice the attack but can do nothing. Suddenly, a golden lightning bolt flashes past the golem, which blows to pieces the hand he used to attack the girl. Superhero Rain informs the brazen thief that showing his trump card so early will get him a counterattack. The thief is clearly puzzled that his main trump card has been trashed so quickly. Rain even decides to give advice to the hapless thief. He informs him that in magic, being the first to use a spell doesn't mean you've already won. The girl who was standing behind Rain's back was as shocked as the thief himself. The girl found herself greatly surprised when she saw the one who had just saved her. Rain is not paying his attention to her at all, and a blue spell circle has already formed in his hand. The thief is very confused and frightened, so he orders the golem to immediately attack the insolent impudent who distracted him last time. Rain, on the other hand, uses the shape of a magic circle. A circle, as well as an inscribed rune, flame. And from his hands, or rather from the circle, comes out a huge amount of water in the direction of the golem. The rich girl is surprised by the fact that the guy turned out to be a water mage. However, it seems that Rain's attack played no role and was useless. The girl confirms that although the water elemental is the natural enemy of the earth elemental, but her monstrous golem won't fall from a 1-star spell. Already even the thief is mocking the guy for bragging and lecturing here, and yet that's all he has against him. He then uses the golem, attacking Rain again and ordering him to die. Rain in turn uses the water spell again. The girl tells the guy that it won't work against the golem anyway. The thief continues to taunt the guy, telling him to stop wasting his time and just die already. Rain tries to restrain the golem with his spell, and the water seems to be successfully restrained. However, the thief doesn't stand aside. He orders the golem to attack the insolent kid even more fiercely. Even Rain is unable to resist the golem's strong attack, so he grabs the girl by the collar and jumps away with her. Despite the seeming defeat, Rain created a huge amount of water and the golem fell, standing on such unstable ground. The boy, on the other hand, managed to skid from the jump while the girl was thrown aside. The thief's control over the golem seems to have subsided as he once again uses the original spell to control the golem. Rain only concludes that stealing someone else's magic seems to be impossible to use her own. The girl, on the other hand, doesn't understand what Rain is up to and tells him that what he's up to might be too dangerous. But there's no stopping the guy now, since the one-star spell was summoned just a few seconds ago. Then he uses the shape of the magic circle, a double square. Then he adds the inscribed runes, Yul and Co. For the earth element magic, he decided to give the properties binding and reversal. The equation to solve is previous differentiation. Finally, he reports that the spell is obtained, and then he would use change of law. Right in front of him, cracks in the ground rejoiced. From those cracks, fetters appeared that completely bound the golem and pinned it to the ground. The golem was no longer combat capable, as it could no longer move. The same bindings also appeared in front of the brazen thief, who seemed to be facing a very sad end. In an instant, the hapless thief was bound hand and foot, and Rain walked over to him and removed his bracelet. Taking a look at what fell into his hands, the guy notices that it's a rather curious artifact. The thief has no honor, so he demands that the guy give him the artifact immediately because it belongs to him. In response to these words, Rain only calls him a fool. After all, the man obviously stole the artifact. So how can it belong to him? Taking a closer look at the artifact, he finds it interesting. The artifact uses stealing control of the enemy's magic, which is very reminiscent of Bel Sidious. 2 magic circles were engraved on the stone, meaning that the artifact was capable of stealing up to a maximum of 2-star magic. The thief wonders what kind of guy caught him and how he was able to cast magic so quickly. However, Rain walks away without answering anything to the thief. Deep down, Rain even scoffs at the thief's question because even if he does tell the thief who he really is, the thief won't believe him. Meanwhile, the grandmother, who has had an artifact stolen for her grandson, is watching the whole confrontation. Rain comes up to her, gives her the artifact and tells her to take care of it. The grandmother gets all emotional and starts crying with happiness that her treasured item has been returned and that her grandson will pass the exam. The people of this city are in full jubilation, calling the rain amazing and awesome. They also remark that Lady Warden was amazing. But then the guy seems to finally remember what he forgot about during the battle, that he really needed to get to the exam right away and he might already be late. So he rushed to run towards the academy under the gaze of the thief. But the thief is immediately caught, so he can't escape in any way. The cloaked woman informs Krista that she has made a mistake and whether she realizes it or not. Krista, who was still sitting on the ground, immediately admits her mistake. Professor Caroline informs her that it is good to be confident, but Krista should not have used the golem so hastily. The girl agrees with the professor and informs her that she will be more careful next time. The woman even notes that quick self-reflection is a good quality of Krista. The girl, however, immediately asks the professor if she saw what the guy did, that his speed of casting magic was almost as fast as the professor's. The professor agrees, and that he seems to be even faster than her. Krista notes that she doesn't understand what happened, since the guy didn't seem that strong to her during the selection. The professor also wonders why the guy was here at this moment and not at the entrance exam, since the exam has already started a long time ago. Rain, however, is rushing to get to the exam, since he doesn't know that it has already started. The girl wonders why such a student can't be accepted, but the professor explains that these are the rules. Krista is not happy about it, because if you are late because you helped someone, why can't you be a little more lenient? The professor, on the other hand, doesn't understand why Krista suddenly decides to think about someone other than herself. Krista, on the other hand, insists that it's because Professor Caroline saw what the guy did too, and that there should definitely be more interesting characters at the school. After a little thought, Caroline agrees with such a statement. Going into the professor's office, she decides to look at the materials on Rain Ludwig. There she finds out that the guy has no experience in magical competitions. Besides, he has no significant achievements in other fields. To her, he seemed like the genius prodigy everyone talks about, who could be trouble sent down on the Ludwig family from the heavens. On the guy's resume, however, there was another line that interested the professor. Rain had been Scalzi Ludwig's assistant for 3 years. It was too interesting, as he was under the former great mage and head of the Osiris school. To this old man, just because you are related doesn't mean that everything will be allowed to you, he told Elin off more than once. This old man is the kind of man who will ruthlessly reject someone if they don't bring results. But Caroline still wonders why, if Rain is an assistant, he is called a genius prodigy in 8 great schools. Deciding that this is very interesting, Caroline asks her assistant to make an appointment with the Chancellor of the Academy, as she needs to discuss something about the student's individual admission. Upon reaching the Chancellor's office, Professor Caroline is told that history is repeating itself. The Chancellor notes that she is not absolutely sure, but it seems that the talents appear in the same period. Hubert from Rohwinum School, Lillian from Rivendell School, Kaiden from Harriman School, Nora from Melev School, Logan from Chaihak School. 5 latecomers from the 8 main schools enrolled immediately. The Warden family also sent a talented child, but she may be in trouble. The Chancellor notes that since the conflict between the magical families and the 8 schools is very deep, getting involved in student disputes is not very pleasant. But despite all that, this is a special situation. She needs to notify the professors and faculty about it. Delon Chancellor Medelia Page asks Caroline to observe the students carefully and intervene only when necessary, but not to intervene too often. As she finishes her speech, Medelia notices that Caroline wants to approach her with some sort of question. She notes that she thinks it is too early to make that decision as well. The Chancellor asks for more information about the situation. Then Caroline informs her that there seems to be another genius besides Krista. She searches through the enrollment files for new students she doesn't know about, but she can't find anyone else. She wonders if it could be a child that the professor wants to give an extra test to. However, Caroline informs her that even if she tells what she saw, they won't believe her, and adds that the Chancellor must have seen it at the family meeting. Caroline says that this is just her personal opinion, but still asks that Rain Ludwig be given a chance to act and not get involved at all. Taking a closer look at his resume, Medelia also wonders how the guy would behave in such a situation. But soon they can find out how the guy will turn out further. After all, the exam is taken by Owen. The Chancellor wonders if the guy is really not going to accept the reward for his heroic deed. Caroline confirms this idea because the guy doesn't like it at all when it turns out that he is some kind of hero, as it brings him problems. He prefers to just read books quietly. Medelia finds this behavior strange. However, Caroline parries it with the fact that weird people usually make good mages. At least that's what her teacher always said. Despite all their talk, Caroline noticed something else about the Chancellor, that she was gloomy today. Medelia wasn't even surprised by this, for Caroline was still as perceptive as ever. After all, Rain Ludwig caught that thief, and it seems that this incident has something to do with the Dark Church. Caroline doesn't seem to believe it. However, Medelia asks the woman if she has ever heard Medelia say anything stupid. They have even been contacted by the Special Cases Department because of the incident, and they are about to arrive at the academy. This whole situation is very unpleasant for Medelia, so she asks Caroline to be prepared. The day after this chaos, and after Rain missed his exam because he was late, they came to him and informed him that he had been accepted anyway. An aura hovered around him that was clearly ominous, telling him not to let anyone come near him. A professor named Caroline suggested to Rain that he pretend to take an extra exam and get on the list of successful candidates. He seemed to be saved, although Caroline was worried that the supplemental exams were perceived as shameful for those who failed the regular exam. But it certainly wasn't as shameful for Rain as coming home without being accepted into the academy. Fearful of retaking the exam, Rain accepted the offer. That's how he found himself at the gates of the greatest magical university, Delon, where the top intellects of the Holy Empire gathered. He stood in front of the gates of Delon, which was so famous, and reflected on his life. He had never had the chance to study in a school or a university. In his previous life, he had learned magic from the head of Osiris School, and in this life, he had only learned from his family. Despite all this, Rain didn't feel any need to learn from anyone at all. But in this life, he needs to find what Esther left for him. She is waiting for Rain at the end of this whole journey. Before he ponders the end of his journey already, he ponders the fact that he needs to tighten up his magical skills, at least to the level he had in his previous life. Krista, who saw him, snapped him out of his thoughts. Turning his attention to the girl who had been drawing his attention, he greets her. Krista is surprised and unknowingly greets the guy herself. She thanks the guy for helping her yesterday, but apparently it was pride, as she didn't have time to finish her sentence before she suddenly starts yelling at the guy, since the girl could have handled it all by herself. All this yelling from the girl starts to draw more and more attention to them, which the guy would not want. One of the students notices that Krista Warden is in front of them. She is the most popular in their generation. Rain notes that Krista is quite famous, even more so than he thought. Krista seems even more proud of herself and enjoys the flattery. She reports there's even a saying that anyone who doesn't know a Krista Warden in their generation is a spy for the Republic. Krista is all glowing, and she delivers some very unpleasant news for a guy who wants to be in the shadows. This popular girl recognizes him as her rival and even considers the guy lucky. Rain is not really happy about being chosen as a rival, as he can't stand annoying creatures. Someone similar to Krista had already been in his past life. The first time he saw the girl was when she came over to say hello to Lynn. She informed him that the guy was the number 2 candidate for the next dean, so the girl would consider him her rival. Rain, on the other hand, thought she was just a shallow girl he had met in the tower. The girl insisted on being treated like a senior since she was the first one to enter the tower. Lynn remembered her very well, as the girl was so boastful that she was simply insufferable. Returning to the present, he only looked at Krista with a sigh. The girl did not appreciate such a gesture and does not understand why the guy is laughing at her. Is he really mocking her? Rain's laughter really pissed her off, as if the guy thought that she had shown everything she could yesterday. Using a spell, the girl activates a sandstorm that covered the entire view around her. Many students were being knocked off their feet by this storm, which was swift. Rain is just tired of the whole encounter, and he doesn't understand why she would use such a spell in such a place. Krista starts bragging, stating that Rain should already be aware of what her true abilities are, and she clearly expects the guy to respond to her attack somehow. After seeing the girl's eyes and the whole situation, the guy notices that the girl doesn't care at all about anything going on around her. Krista is very much on Giselle, perhaps Giselle reincarnated into her, which can't help but make Rain angry. The guy decides that maybe the girl should be pointed out to her, so she realizes the difference. He even starts to activate a spell. However, at that moment, another figure appears. The guy who appeared notices what a dramatic display has appeared in front of him. On one side of this confrontation is the best rookie Krista. On the other side is the genius prodigy who barely passed the supplementary exam. He notices that this is a comparison between the worst and the best. This stranger turns out to be another genius Hubert from the Rohwinham school that Chancellor mentioned. What do you think we're in for next in this story? What will Hubert really be like? A lot of students were interested in the guy who showed up. It was Hubert from Rohwinham High School. Some of the students have heard that Hubert has a rivalry with Krista. Hubert asks that Krista continue her altercation with Rain as he thinks it is great entertainment. Krista decides to save face and snidely notes that the quality of the audience is too low, so it's not fun. Plus, Krista notes that it was unfortunate that if Hubert had gotten caught up in her magic, he would have flown somewhere far away. Krista thinks the guy should thank her for her attention. Hubert reports with a nervous grin that he is so grateful to the girl that he even gets tears. However, he wonders to Krista if it's too shameless of her to say such a thing when she can't even handle a newcomer. He points out that a girl has to know her own, or she'll regret it later. Krista only admonishes him that the finalist should not say such things. The girl has a temper, and she asks Hubert to show her what he can do. Hubert parries that the girl's proud nature has not changed. He thinks that Krista will dishonor her family if she continues to live like this. He even feels sorry for the girl. All this time, Rain was silent. Suddenly, Hubert turned to him and pointed out disparagingly that Rain was so insignificant that Hubert hadn't even noticed he was still here. Hubert continued to mock Rain, calling him a brilliant young master who got in through an extra test. Hubert wonders why Rain is looking at him like that. Maybe Rain is looking at him because there's something wrong with his face, or the guy doesn't understand something in Hubert's words. Rain lazily points out that nothing in Hubert's words really bothers him. The only question Rain was wondering was what kind of person was standing in front of him, who was acting so cocky. Rain wondered if the person in front of him even knew how to use magic. Rain even notes that if the guy wants to try to fight him, he must be good at magic. Rain literally embarrassed Hubert in front of a huge number of students who were shocked at Rain's words. Hubert's arrogance was undermined, and all his contrived confidence. He was too furious after hearing this. He even asked Rain to repeat what he had just said. All of this made Krista laugh. Hubert still found himself humiliated, including in front of her. Krista presses the hurt again and notes that Hubert found himself trampled while he bragged in front of the newcomer. Krista remarks that if she had been in Hubert's shoes, she would have been embarrassed to even show her face afterward. All of this amused Krista greatly. At the same moment, one of the teachers came in and wondered why the newcomers were crowded together in one place. Krista was still laughing, so the teacher called out to her. The teacher asked what Cadet Krista, the freshman representative, was doing in this particular spot. The teacher asked Krista to hurry up and go inside to prepare for the oath of office. Krista set off following the teacher. Rain also, with an indifferent look, decided to leave the perplexed Hubert. Before leaving the hall, Krista called out to Rain. The boy was upset that the girl was paying attention to him again. Krista states that she will leave it at this point because she doesn't have time. However, she reminds Rain that they will work things out properly next time. In his thoughts, Rain was only thinking about getting the girl to switch to someone else and stop bothering him. Some wondered why Krista was so interested in this loser. Also, he is a brilliant young mastermind. After all, this loser couldn't get in and only passed through an additional exam, meaning they can't even be compared. However, another guy, who turned out to be more informed, cools the ardor of the disgruntled. He points out that Krista will have a hard time against this guy. One of the disgruntled ones asks the guy what he means. The red-haired guy then explains that the loser, as he is called, was actually Assistant Director Scalzi. The red-haired man points out that once the guy sees how strong Rain really is, the guy won't say such stupid things anymore. After that, the 1388th Delon University admission ceremony began. Hubert was still sitting with an extremely displeased look during the ceremony. Krista, as the freshman representative, came to the podium and read out an inspirational speech to the freshmen. Only Rain was not particularly pleased with Krista's inspirational speeches. The guy only wished that this whole admission ceremony would be over as soon as possible. However, there was something that could interest the guy and bring him out of his half-asleep state. For it was reported that the Chancellor's welcome speech to the freshmen was about to be delivered. Medelia Page, the strongest mage of the Empire, was to give the speech. As soon as Medelia came out, she immediately looked at all the freshmen with her penetrating gaze. The situation in the hall immediately changed. All the freshmen tensed up at that look. It was not surprising. Medelia Page was the greatest mage of the Empire, the current head of the Mage Council. She was a direct descendant of the founder of magic, Emitsa Page. Just by looking at her, Rain felt something familiar from the past. That hair color, that purple hair, was genetics. Medelia greeted the freshmen and informed them of her name and position. The woman congratulated 233 freshmen on their enrollment at the university. However, Medelia noted that half of the incoming students will not make it to the second year. These students will either be held or expelled, and those freshmen will not make it to sophomore year. Of the 117 survivors, only about 60 will make it to the third year. Of those, half will make it to graduation. Medelia summed up her remarks by saying that less than 30 graduates graduate from the university each year. This is exactly what Delon is. It is where students' talents are honed. At Delon, students are constantly put to the test under the guise of grinding to determine if the students are rough stones that can become jewels. Delon's policy is one of unrestricted competition. Those who fall behind in the competition are not even eligible for graduation. Medelia notes that students will feel all of this acutely throughout their studies, so she vehemently asks students to keep honing their skills. To the interested or frightened looks of the students, Medelia asked the students to fight each other and not stop their development. After all, that is how Delon is structured. The training lasts until the insignificant stones shine with their own brilliance. Medelia even wishes her apprentices good luck in a peculiar way, wishing that in 3 years they would meet again in this place. For then she will no longer just be the Chancellor, but will be a fellow mage and will welcome her colleagues. Medelia sincerely wishes each student good luck with passing this test. The students thought carefully about the Chancellor's words. A moment later, the students saw off the departing Medelia Page with thunderous applause. Was this a reference or a complete copy of the principal's welcome speech from the anime and manga Food Wars Shokugeki no Soma? Rain didn't stay on the sidelines either. He applauded the Chancellor's welcome speech. He himself was looking forward to seeing Medelia Page in 3 years. Teachers also observed this welcome speech of the Chancellor. Teacher Caroline noted that it looked chaotic, but she liked the energy. Another teacher notes that the energy should match the ability. Caroline unwittingly agrees with this. Caroline asks Owen how his students are doing. Owen immediately says things that would get him suspended from teaching in current times. He had expected this batch of students to be of a high caliber, but all he saw now were idiots with manure in their heads. Caroline inquired as to what he meant. Owen believes that all students are doomed to fail. Later, Rain with the sheet in his hands continued to explore the university grounds where his next 3 years would be spent. He finally reached one building. It seemed to be the faculty building, the Sleeping Dragon Hall. Rain couldn't help but admire the architecture of the building. He even noted that it was truly a majestic building. Walking down the empty corridor, he finally reached the right classroom. The auditorium was empty. None of the students had arrived yet, and Rain was the first person in. He found a seat and sat down, waiting for class to begin. The seat, like any self-respecting protagonist, was by the window so that he could admire nature thoughtfully. Rain even relaxed and enjoyed the pleasant breeze caressing his face. The guy was distracted from his thoughts by a classmate who came up and greeted him. Rain involuntarily greeted his classmate as well. However, that person turned out to be the annoying and clingy Krista, who he wanted to stay as far away from as possible. Touching his forehead with his hand, Rain disappointedly states that even the sky is indifferent to him. Krista, on the other hand, is happy. She notes that Rain will have to compete with the best student right from the first lesson. A pink-haired girl peeks out from behind Krista's back. The girl decides to loosely translate Krista's words. In her opinion, Krista's words sounded like, "I'm so happy to be sitting next to you." Krista isn't even going to deny it because she is happy, as she is going to bully the arrogant guy's nose right from the start. All of this drives Rain into despondency. The dream of a quiet study remains just a dream. Unexpectedly, Hubert appears and arrogantly points out what a delightful situation has appeared before him. He notes that the daughter of the Panton family has also decided to join and is watching the play. He even envies the fact that mages from noble families control 2 or 3 vassal families. Hubert notices how sorry he is that the lady is being rude, pointing her finger at others. The pink-haired girl remarks that Hubert just doesn't get it, and that this is part of Miss Krista's charm. The girl notes that even without it, Krista is still very charming. At least Krista is more interesting than someone who is only impressive in appearance. This girl, Gertrude Panton, is from the family of Baron Panton. After that, Gertrude started bickering with Hubert. From all these people, Rain felt that he would soon get motion sickness. Frida once asked a guy if he would like to go to school someday. The boy said no. The girl, however, found this answer strange. Then the guy explained that he is already a 4-star elite mage. Therefore, he doesn't understand what else his school can teach him. The guy considered it a waste of time. Frida only called him a fool. She pointed out that school is not a place to study to achieve academic skills. The boy then didn't understand why he should be in school at all then. Exhaling smoke from her mouth, Frida replied with a smile, as if remembering bygone days, that people were important in school. Looking at her classmates, Rain doesn't know if Frida was right, and whether school is really the place where they learn about the kind of people who stood in front of him. After a while, it was finally time for class. At that moment, teacher walked into the classroom. Looking at the man, Rain was surprised that in front of them, such a huge man, and then he remembered that it was their mentor. Many of the students tensed up. A strange tension began to hang in the air. Rain asked Krista why there was such a reaction to Owen. Krista was only surprised that Rain did not know Owen. That professor was known for being stingy with grades. Owen carefully looked around the classroom and scrutinized the people he would have to teach. The teacher only sighed frustratedly. He never imagined that he would have to supervise the pathetic monkeys that sat in front of him. He even admitted that he had no motivation to be a teacher. Owen is too upset and makes absolutely no secret of his dismissive behavior towards his students. He frustratingly states that these monkeys only have dung instead of brains. Owen did not stop there. He was outraged that a student wasn't looking at his teacher while he was talking, so he threw a piece of chalk at his student, hitting him in the neck. Owen is too frustrated with the behavior and quality of the students. He complains that the students still dare to laugh, and yet they know absolutely nothing. He then goes on a tirade about how the students have somehow decided that they own the whole world since they got into Delon, and do the apprentices dream of becoming a court mage of some nobleman, or living the good life by building their own tower of mages. Owen tells his disciples to discard such illusions. He even assures them that if they achieve such a thing, he will let them call him master. But he does not believe in his disciples, for they are all monkeys who have barely grown hair. These monkeys have a mountain of things to learn. Owen then asks if any of his students are from the 8 main schools. Hubert and the rest of the similar students smugly raise their hands. After all, they consider themselves standing above everyone else. However, the teacher called them the worst of all the students because they were idiots from the 8 major schools to him. He thought that they have strange math formulas that they cite in the name of school traditions, that it amazes him. The teacher does not even expect any contribution from such students. He just wants such students to stay out of the way. These words knocked all the hubris out of such students. Owen then asked if there were any noble mage families in his class. Rain and Krista raised their hands, already expecting insults from the teacher. The teacher didn't disappoint anyone, as he stated that those from noble families were just disgusting. The teacher believes that such students act like all-knowing and arrogant students who have never experienced hardship. He tells them to go home and learn how to change their own clothes first, before returning. Krista's face turned very red at this humiliation from the teacher. In his reflections, Rain refers to the teacher as a great ape, with an unprecedented talent as an orator. He notes that the teacher is more suited to the role of cult leader than mage. Owen feels that his challenge for this year is to make at least useful mages out of his students, so that the students are better than monkeys. He believes that there is no room in his class for those who are even worse than a monkey, and such students he feels should be thrown out. He even asks that his students at least try to evolve into humans. After that, he goes up to one of his students and asks why he doesn't answer him. Does the guy not pay attention to his teacher? Owen felt that he needed to teach the student how to answer the questions posed to him. Owen even asked if the student thought he was scary. The student immediately started stammering and saying that the teacher was not scary. The teacher continued to mock the boy. He declares that since the student doesn't think he's scary, he's a compliant teacher. The poor student is too scared. After that, Owen decides to conduct a test. The students who are sitting next to each other will form teams of 2 to take the test. Owen also points out to the students not to take this one lightly, because the team that comes in last place will be expelled, meaning the students will be expelled from the university. Upon hearing the information that someone will be expelled, the students became worried. After all, they had just entered the university, and already someone would be expelled today. And it was possible to expel even one of them or their acquaintances. Some of them even thought that the teacher was saying that to scare his students and that he would not do such a thing in reality. The teacher went to the blackboard, took the chalk and started writing something on the board. After he finished, he stated that students are only given 20 minutes. From this point on, the students must solve the problem written on the board, on their own paper, which the students have on their desk. Students must then hand in their sheets. Those who cannot solve the problem in the allotted time and those who are the last to hand in the solution will be excluded, as the teacher said earlier. The class froze for some reason, apparently thinking about the teacher's words and expulsion from the university. Then Owen yelled at his students that the exam had already started. The teacher thought that since there were 2 people solving the problem, even monkeys would be able to handle 2-star magic, if those monkeys could pull themselves together. This teacher is so annoying and arrogant, he is not going to let a single weak student pass to the 2nd year. Will Rain manage to surprise his teacher who dislikes monkeys so much? And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.